Okay, so let's continue where we left off. If my voice sounds a little different, it's because in the interim between recording the last section to here and now I had RSV, so I'm still recovering from that, but hopefully my voice doesn't get too cracked and is not too obnoxious. Okay. So what we're going to do as we continue on this, we look at our references, specifically the images we've been working with here from this model, you're going to see that there is a lot of detail, even on the model, which is probably less detailed than in the real world object, on the mechanics of this and the weapons array there on the side and this sensor array on the other side of the head. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and speed through some of these things. And what I'd really like to do is really just to focus on blocking out these objects. And because we've already blocked most of this other stuff out, and if you've been modeling with primitives before, you kind of have a general idea how to do this. I might go through like one little blaster, how to make a quick mock-up of it. And then I'm going to let the tutorial go pretty quickly. You can work on mocking those things up on your own. And then there's a couple spots where we're really going to focus the time. And I really don't want this tutorial to last forever. So that's why we're going to do those things. So we are going to quickly make up some weapons arrays here. And I may not even worry about this part of the model as well, just for now, right? Because in the tutorial, really, I'm trying to show you skills and techniques, not complete this entire thing. But we will look at a few other ways to do some more detail up here on the top. And so I think we're actually going to start with the lid of this thing, and then we'll work on the weapons arrays. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. All right, so up on the top of this, we've already made our cuts. So we have the hole in the lid of this thing, and we've got this circular hole in the surface. Now, if we look at our reference, you'll see there's actually some buildup here, some rings that are built up in order to create this lid attachment and everything. There's a bunch of other detail. We're not going to deal with a whole lot of that, but at least I wanted to show you how to get these rings to appear where they're at. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to want to do, right, is we want to create that additional geometry that's going to be around where the lid is. And so in order to do that, we're going to introduce a tool called Slide that's going to allow us to essentially select the edge of the hole and slide it to make it larger or smaller and it'll slide along the existing plane. And so of the polygon. So what we're going to do first is we're going to turn the thicken off. So we're going to uncheck thicken. This is the hatch, at least in mine. I have a few called head in here, but this hatch is the hatch. I've named it that. I'm going to turn that off too. What I want is I basically want to have that hole there so I'm not accidentally selecting anything on the hatch. And it just makes it easier to see that I've selected all of these points. Now, it would be fantastic if I was to be able to go to edges mode, select the head object or whatever you're calling it, cockpit, and then be able to use my loop selection tool, which if it's not visible here, it should be one of these options. And loop select this, but occasionally, because the way geometry is cut and the way it figures out what's connected to what in Cinema, it won't work even though this is clearly a loop, right? There are other ways we can select it, however, right? So there's another selection tool called Phong break selection. And Phong, as we've talked about before in one of the earlier things, is basically like a way of, it's sort of like, where does the geometry change a certain number of degrees or more? What's nice is that open edges like this also work with that. So with the Phong selection, I can just click on there and select that edge. Now, the slide tool is down here on the side, and note that I am in edges mode. If you're not in edges mode, it's not going to work quite the same. But down here is the slide tool, and if I'm in polygons mode, right, the slide tool vanishes from the side because this is now like an adaptive interface. So now I've got my slide tool. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, if I just click and drag while it's highlighted in white, it's going to enlarge or potentially shrink the hole. It might not let me shrink it too much though. Or maybe I'm just at the edge of my screen. Yeah, I can make it a lot bigger though, right? But we don't want to use it in that way. What we want to do is we want to be able to copy that edge and essentially expand it, right? So if I hold down Control while I do this, what it's going to do is it's going to create an additional edge, right? And it's going to create the edges in between the polygons in there, which is exactly what we want to do. Now I'm going to undo that because I need to look and just kind of get a general take on like how thick this thing should be. And you can see it looks like it, right? It's, we're going to say that's our inner edge. This will be our outer edge. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to expand it pretty thick. And so I'm going to hit Control again, right? And just pull this out, make it about this thick. Fantastic. Now what I can do is I can select all of these polygons and I can use the extrude tool to create that additional thickness. So I'm going to go into polygon mode. I'm going to see if loop selection will work. It may not. Oh, look at that. It's actually working. Fantastic. Right. It's good to test it. And if it doesn't, you can always go to the brush if you really need to. And then again, extrude is this box with the orange top here. I can also hit the letter D on the keyboard. And then if I just click and drag, I can start to lift this up. Right. And I'm going to lift it up about that much, rotate my view a little bit so I can kind of see what I'm doing. Okay, that looks good. And then if you look at the details on this, right, there's actually an additional level where this lifts up. And you can see it kind of is tapered in from both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and use my friend the slide tool again. I could also use inset, but in this case, slide might be a better option. And so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can loop select an edge. I'm going to go back to edges mode. And it looks like it will let me loop select the interior edge. And I can do the exterior edge as well, but I'm going to start with just the interior edge. I'm going to use slide. I'm going to hold down Control. I'm going to click and drag off in space somewhere. And maybe that would be probably good. And I might need to change the size of my lid or eventually as well, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, now I'm going to use my loop mode again on the outside. I'm going to go over to slide. And I want you to note MO are the quick keys for this, right? I hit the letter M on the keyboard and then hit the letter O and I will select that. And again, right, with any of these, if I hit M, right, it's going to open up this menu that has all the different things option. And then I can go down and find O and say, oh yeah, that's slide. All right, so I get O, I've got slide selected and I'm going to hit Control, click and drag. And notice it does go down the side as well, right? You can actually go around corners and stuff, which is really handy. But we're just going to go ahead and slide that there. Now I'm going to go back to polygon mode. And I've already got the polygon selected that I want to hit. So I can hit the letter D on the keyboard, click and drag, and lift this up just a little bit more. Now, if I was going to be doing like a highly detailed model for cinema or something like that, I would definitely bevel all of these edges pretty substantially. In this case, I'm going to leave it more squared off, in part for time and in part because, yeah, I'm just trying to show these basic tools. And if you wanted to go in and select the edges and bevel these edges and do all of those additional steps a little bit, be free, go for it. It'll look great. Okay, so I've got that general geometry set. Now, there's a couple options I have here. There's these other parts that are popping out. You could go ahead and attempt to model those as well. I'm not exactly sure the best way to do that. I would experiment with a couple of things. And this is something that I feel like takes note, right? Like I go through this and I'm like, this is the way to do it. And that's only based on a lot of experimentation on my part and making mistakes, undoing things and trying it again, right? And eventually I've learned different ways that work better than others and which method would be preferable. But it's something where you just sort of have to experiment with it until you find a method or a way that seems to be the most efficient. And then someday, 5 years into your process, you'll see somebody do it a different way that's way better. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, I been doing it that way the entire time. And so with this, because they're square, I could potentially try and use extrude. It's going to put some potentially strange polygon stuff going on underneath there. If I was to do this, I might honestly just create little boxes and snap them to the edge of this. But again, because we're going quick, I'm not going to do that additional detail, but feel free to do the same.